clearly, the Khazarian mafia is running scared and running out of ammunition. The fact that the Khazarian mob-controlled Bank of Japan was forced last week to resort to negative interest rates proved their fake fiat money is now worth less than nothing. The Federal Reserve Board will soon be forced to do the same thing. The more you put money in their banks, the more that money vanished. More about that later. The other thing that is clearly falling is their ability to create mass panic, fear, and loathing, their traditional control tools. Their latest attempt upgrading a relatively minor illness known as Zika virus into a baby head-striking pandemic is so totally fake, with nothing but computer graphics of small-headed babies as evidence. That very few real doctors or hospitals are taking it seriously. Time to round up the criminal liars at the WTO. The latest attempt to create disease panic may be relating to efforts to force the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to cede over their vaccination and other medical activities to meritocratic management. Bill Gates is also now the point man for computer fraud to make sure a Khazarian mobster wins the upcoming U.S. presidential election. This is being presented as Microsoft volunteering the use of its app to count votes in Iowa. Of course, the Khazarian mob is not going to be allowed to steal yet another U.S. election, U.S. agency sources say. Instead, the FBI probe into Hillary Clinton is being expanded to intel agencies to purge her moles and embedded Bush Israeli agents, the Pentagon sources say. A CIA source, meanwhile, put his neck on the line by predicting Hillary will be indicted by February 28. Here is Hillary describing her master in her own words, spoken on July 15, 2009 at the Rockefeller-controlled Council on Foreign Relations Washington, D.C. office. I am delighted to be here in this new headquarters. I've been often to, I guess, the mothership in New York City. But it's good to have an outpost of council right here down the street from the State Department. We get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have as far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future. Many clear signals are already being sent to the Wall Street mobsters in New York. For one thing, that corporate media control grid is being hacked. According to Pentagon sources, Rupert Murdoch's Fox network has been ordered to reboot the X-5 program to reveal truth in plain sight about alien technology, free energy, anti-gravity, 11 September, NSA, depopulation, and etc. Agency sources say Bush canceled the show in 2002 to prevent it from exploding the 11 September. Meanwhile, the CIA has classified its UFO files. Other corporate media outlets have also joined the sudden return to real reporting with such outlets as the New York Times and Time Life reporting 11 September truth. The US, Russian, and Chinese alliance against the Khazarian mafia is also proceeding well in their takedown of the Khazarian mob regime currently, enslaving the brainwashed people of Israel with fear and paranoia. The Israeli power grid has hacked and taken down on January 25th, after which, on January 27, U.S. top General Jose Dunford and Defense Secretary Ashton Carter visited the U.S. Cyber Command to encourage cyber troops to up the fight against ISIS and their sponsors. In a clear sign that sensible Israelis are reading the writing on the wall, Israel Defense Minister Moshe Yaalon tried to blame Turkey for being in charge of ISIS. The U.S. has also now joined the EU in a demand for labeling and boycott of all goods produced in the illegally occupied West Bank. U.S.-Russian military cooperation against Israel has also meant that Iranian-affiliated troops have now arrived at the Israeli border while the Israeli Air Force remains grounded and unable to do anything about it. As the Mossad-linked news site Debka puts it, leaders opt to avoid action on three menacing fronts. Russian and U.S. military cooperation is now extended to share information about China as well as about enemies like ISIS, the bad guys in Israel, Turkey, drugs, Saudi Arabia, and Kabul targets. For example, the Russian Insider News site said the following about the U.S. State Department criminal Victoria Nuland, the chief agitator and troublemaker in Ukraine. She is a target. The U.S. and Cuban militaries are also now in full cooperation mode to cut off the flow of drug money to the Bush Kabul and their ISIS mercenary proxy. Pentagon and Vatican officials agree. That is why Cuba has supplied with Hellfire missile to allow it to shoot down drug-running planes, the Pentagon sources say. There has also been agency and Pentagon cooperation aimed at preventing Kabul provocateurs from starting a civil war inside the United States. This is the case with the dispute going on in Oregon, where a large group of armed militiamen seized a national wildlife refuge property. The dispute started with what appears to be a legitimate grievance over excessive persecution of two ranchers by federal agents. However, this grievance is now headed to the courts where hopefully justice will prevail. In the meantime, evidence has emerged that Khazarian crisis actors have arrived on the scene in an attempt to provoke civil strife. It is understandable for patriotic Americans to feel angry with the federal government. However, picking the wrong battle against the wrong enemy will only result in defeat. The enemy is not in Oregon. It is in Washington, D.C. and New York. So if you really feel like fighting for freedom, go there and attack the Khazarian mob bosses like the Bush or Clinton crime family and do not take it out on some poor working FBI shift or local sheriff. In any case, the real war will be won in the economic, financial, and economic spheres, and here, things are going very badly for the Khazarians. For one thing, last week, the heads of the African Union appear to have joined Iran, Russia, Western Europe, and many others in moving away from Khazarian-controlled debt instruments mislabeled US dollars, and agreed to go with gold-backed yuan instead. The Khazarians continue to lose any real backing for their so-called dollars. For example, there are now 500 times more contracts to buy gold at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange than there is physical gold to back these contracts. Real as opposed to paper, gold trading has now migrated to the Shanghai Exchange. Now the London Bullion Market Association appears to have lost control of the ability to set the price of silver when last week the price turned out to be 6% lower than the physical spot price. After the Japanese emperor family failed to find gold to back the yen, they went to Philippines last week. The Khazarian-controlled Bank of Japan was forced to join the European Central Bank and issue negative interest rates. This means real Japanese money will be fleeing to cash into real assets like gold and silver. The Khazarian slave bankers are under the illusion that negative interest rates will boost the real economy by forcing businesses and people to invest and spend their money. However, with Japan and Europe suffering from striking populations and economies, stealing the people's savings is not going to boost production. The Khazarian slave regime in Japan is on its last legs anyway. Last week, Akira Amari, the Japanese economy minister who oversees TPP negotiation, was forced to resign over bribery charges. Others will follow. In Malaysia too now, it turns out the Goldman Sachs and the Saudi Arabians are bribing Prime Minister Najib Razak. You can be sure the trail of this bribery investigation will eventually lead the truth about the Malaysian Air Flight 380 disappearance. The Khazarians are now losing electronic control of the financial system as well, as banks worldwide are being forced to install CIPS, which will replace the current Khazarian SWIFT system. This will take some time, which may be why the Chinese delegate to the White Dragon, who is involved in the bank computer system, said 2018 will be the year when internationally traded US dollars will have a Chinese signature on them. The Khazarian mobster hedge funds such as Soros, Carlyle, Nexus, and etc. have all said they are going to gang up and bet on the devaluation of Chinese yuan. However, what these people do not get is that the Chinese are busy shedding their dollars holdings on purpose because they know they will be replacing these dollars. In any case, no matter how many dollars the Khazarian put in their bank computers, reality is a different thing. Even though a growing chorus of bankers is calling on a ban of cash so that people will be forced to accept negative interest rates, they cannot ban reality. On this front, the global trade squeeze against people refusing to pay for shipping in yuan is beginning to hurt. Pentagon sources say a shutdown of New York Post by dock workers is a message to Wall Street and the Khazarian mafia. Now, South Korea has reported an 18.5% drop in trade in January. Finally, the official Chinese Xinhua news site has confirmed a recent report by this newspaper that the Chinese Communist Party was moving towards power sharing with other political parties. There can be no doubt about it, the good guys are winning.